there's a big overlap between the gaming community and the heavy metal community. There are a lot of metalheads that are deep into video games, and in both industries, women are very much underrepresented. Today, we're talking about women in games. I am Kiki, the host of the Bleeding Metal podcast. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm super excited to have the lovely Charly on the show today. Can you please introduce yourself, Charly?
Yeah, hi. So first off, I'm from Scotland. So if people don't understand me, I'm sorry, that's your problem. It's my accent. So my pronouns are she, her. I've been in game industry for 20 plus years, but I actually started out as a music journalist interviewing metal bands and punk bands because that was my vibe. I did localization, culturalization in China, so Chinese to English to Chinese. I then did some art for games. I did a PhD in games. I taught games lecturing. I was the director of partnerships for Global Game Jam and for a very short time, the executive director. And now I'm head of business development for the Parallel Group and indie game business. And to your point, I fully agree. There's such a crossover between metal and a lot of music and games because music is so important in creating that flavor and that atmosphere in games. And yes, sadly, women are very much underrepresented, as are many other minorities within the gaming space.
True. And that is what brought the Bleeding Metal podcast to life. Back when we started in 2013, we were called Metal and High Heels. We wanted to be very visual about our aim to support and make more visible all the work the women in metal do, not only on the stage as musicians, but also behind the scenes.
Mhm.
And that is part of what you do. And we met through the Women in Games Association.
Yeah, there's a common fallacy that women that support gaming and games or metal or other music are just essentially groupies. It's a lot more than that. Like they're creators, they're the people that are pushing the boundaries, they're people that are trying to take up space in a space where oftentimes they're looked down on as just a groupie or, oh, she just did this.
Mhm.
There's a lot of power that women have. And I think women in games in particular, part of that is of forging these bonds and helping each other and striving to make everyone's voices heard and not just being like, now this is my position. I'm super jealous of anyone that's trying to come into my space because they'll take my job. Instead, you should
Yeah.
be reaching out and helping each other, amplifying each other's voices. Because
Yeah.
if one person wins, then we all fucking win at the end of the day.
Absolutely. That is so true and so important. Now, can we go a little bit further into your personal story? Can you tell us how you got in contact with all of these amazing things that you've been doing? What came first, music or games?
So music came first. Music's always been something really important to me. Actually, both at the same time. So my dad used to work offshore as an oil rig worker. So 2 weeks away, 2 weeks at home.
Mhm.
So his 2 weeks at home was me and my dad's time. And that would be filled, because my dad was a geek, with playing games and listening to all of his music. I think by the age of 5, I knew all of the lyrics to every Police album. I was going to marry, stay, the whole thing.
Yeah.
But music became very important to me. And it's a way that me and my friends bonded and big topics of our conversation. We like to find new bands, new interesting bands. I'm Generation X, so right at the perfect time for grunge, all of that kind of thing. And Nirvana
Mhm.
changed our lives essentially. So I was cheeky, and I still am a little bit, I guess. I would look at albums and then find the management and then go through directory inquiries and phone up the management and say that I was a music journalist and could I go see the band in concert and interview them. And through that, we then had to set up a school newspaper because I was going to see all these concerts.
Yeah.
And I was supposed to put the interview somewhere, but I would only see like my favorite bands, like the bands I loved the most. And I remember one year, P&J, this is the Press and Journal, like the big newspaper in Aberdeen in Scotland, phoned me up because they had a new band and they'd heard of my work that I was doing with other bands and would I interview them? And I was like, well, it depends on the band. And it was Take That. And I said, no, thank you.
What?
I have no interest. So I turned Take That down. I don't know how many people can say that.
Oh,
But
damn.
I flexed on them, man. That went on for quite a few years. And then I ended up through the journalism and making connections, networking. being asked if I would rep for a band to set up their Scottish tour, which I did, but then university. And so I never really went much further with that. I
Okay.
did have an interview set up for NME,
Hmm.
and I didn't turn up because I was a precocious teenager and I didn't like the way at the time they would love a band and this is the band everyone's supposed to love. And then the very next week, no one was supposed to like them. We didn't like them anymore. They weren't cool.
Okay.
And I didn't like that kind of dictatorial
Hmm.
vibe that they were giving off. So I never turned up for my interview and thus ended my music journalism career.
Oh, wow.
And games was similar. I went to China to teach English, always played games all my life through networking, through connections, through speaking Chinese. My friends said, look, our studio does MMO RPGs, so massively multiplayer online RPGs.
Hmm.
We want Chinese English translation. Can you help? But yeah, sure, I'll give it a shot. And so you do localization, and that leads to culturalization because some jokes don't translate and some cultural facts, pop culture, things like that, they don't translate very well. So you start to add in culturalization. And when you're doing that, there's this certain element of game design that you're adding in as well, because different players, different player cultures,
Right.
who are the games aimed at, that kind of thing. And so that began my career in games. So yeah, very long answer for a very easy question that I just babbled for.
That's exactly what I wanted to hear, all the detail. What did you study in university?
Oh, so my first degree was philosophy and film studies. My second
Cool.
was Mandarin and Chinese culture. And I did a
Mhm,
master's in international education, leadership and learning. And then my
mhm.
PhD is in using gamescapes to preserve cultural heritages, languages, traditions, and enhance teaching practices.
I read that on your bio, and I thought that is super, super interesting. Can you tell us a little bit more about that and how that research started?
Games are a perfect way to preserve little bits of culture, heritage, tradition, language in a way that people will engage with them and want to learn without actually feeling like they're learning. There's a Simpsons episode where
Yeah.
Bart's playing that computer game all the time and Lisa's like, haha, you've learned. Ooh, no, when he stops learning. If I gave a book about Middle Eastern culture to a kid, they probably wouldn't look at it, but they
Yeah.
would play Assassin's Creed and learn almost by proxy without even realizing. As a Scot, we have about 12 Scots leads, which are dialects, but three main languages. We've got Doric, which is
Mhm,
what we speak in Aberdeenshire, where I'm from, Scots Gaelic, and the language Scots. Scots Gaelic, sadly, is very endangered, and
mhm.
there's not enough people learning it, and the knowledge holders are passing. But if,
Oh.
by implementing it in games, people naturally start to learn and it preserves things. So you can go back. Like games can often be a time capsule, a way of engaging urbanized youths from different Indigenous communities that are engaged with their culture and
Mhm,
pulling them back into that culture in a way that is accessible and fun. And really important because a lot of these cultures, traditions, and obviously language, a lot of them are just oral. And so when
mhm.
the knowledge holders pass, all of that little bits of knowledge pass, and that is our heritage. That's what makes us. So anything we can do to preserve, that's my whole thesis, I guess.
That's amazing. Yeah, to preserve the diversity of the whole world and to be able to still emotionally connect to all of these pieces of language, of culture, of history
Oh, yeah.
that have been developing and that have helped the world that we live in today.
No, exactly. I mean, there's a game that's just come out by the Chinese room that I absolutely love. It's called Still Wakes the Deep,
Okay.
and it's set on an oil rig in the North Sea in Scotland. Now, my dad, as I said, was an oil rig worker. He passed maybe 5 years ago. It was very sad. But I played this game and it's real Scottish people, it's real Scottish accents. So as a Scottish person, I can play and go, oh, that man's from Aberdeen, that man's from Dundee, that man's from Glasgow. They're
Wow.
speaking how we speak. It's so realistic for an oil rig. So I'm playing this branching horror game with tears running down my face because it was like a
Oof.
punch to the heart, that
Yeah.
connection to my culture, not only my culture, but my dad's life. It's really impactful. And that's the power, but also the responsibility that we have in games. We should do it right, but we should make sure we are absolutely doing it right. And by
Mhm.
doing it right, it just means getting people from those cultures involved in the creation. So you're not doing research on the internet, you're actually talking to the people that you're featuring within the game. and
Right.
not as a token.
That is a huge challenge. Before we go a little more into that, this whole story also reminded me of a podcast I listened to last year, maybe. As people who have listened to the podcast a lot know, I come from Ecuador. I was born in and grew up in Quito, in Ecuador. And we also are losing our native language. And there are a few schools and people can still actively learn it, but most people are not even interested and it's not part of standard education. So it's really sad. And I heard this story on this podcast about the journalist who was narrating how her grandpa had gotten Alzheimer's, I think,
Mm.
and forgot Spanish.
Oh,
And so he was only in the last of his years, he was only speaking Quechua and she didn't understand it. And how that very close relationship that they had started fading because they didn't share a language anymore.
mhm.
And how important that can be. I still remember that story because it just hit me so hard in the field.
No, exactly. So I lived in Fuzhou in China, and so they speak a local dialect called Fuzhouhua. And my son's half Chinese. His family live in Chanle, which is also the city next to Fuzhou, and they speak Chanlehua, which is essentially the same, but some words are slightly different. My son's grandmother was raised to be a wife and a mother. She never went to school. She can't read or write. She can't speak Mandarin. She only speaks Fuzhouhua or Chanlehua.
Mhm.
And the pool of speakers of Fuzhouhua is getting smaller and smaller now because it's that same kind of vibe of it's just the language of the uneducated. It's the farmer's language. If you're educated, you speak Mandarin and you speak English or any other language, but
Right.
not this common language of the uneducated. And it's been really sad to see that pool of people that she can speak to get smaller and smaller. So now she very rarely leaves the village because
Mhm.
she's so worried of not being able to communicate with anyone in her own country, in her own town,
Right.
that it is. And people don't really realize that these indigenous languages and indigenous dialects are part of our culture, part of our heritage, are
Yeah.
something that we should be celebrating, not in any way to exclude others. Let's just sit and talk our language and ignore everyone else, but let's do this and let's share it and let's keep it growing and keep it alive.
Yeah. And also just to show the world how diverse people are
Mhm.
and how diverse cultures are, and to open our eyes a little more and see things further than the standard that we see in television or
Mhm.
in media in general most of the time. I recently played this a little indie game called Never Alone.
Oh, I love that game.
It's so
Yeah.
beautiful. I will link the game in the description because it's a really beautiful story full with mythology
Mhm.
and beliefs and just so much culture about a tribe in Alaska, if I'm not mistaken.
And made by an indigenous group of deafs as well. So it's authentic and sovereign, and that's the importance of it all.
And if you're really interested, and I absolutely was, after each game segment, you can watch videos that explain the lore of
Mhm.
the story. And you can see how, what you were saying, how authentic the team actually was and how their purpose with this game was actually to show the life and how they're losing their traditions.
100%. And there's so many wonderful indie games that are created by indigenous creators, partly to share this culture, partly to preserve their culture, and also to learn more about their own history
Mhm,
themselves. One is Skadmat, which is based on the Nordic Sami people.
mhm,
And I'm good friends with the creators. And even in the creation process, they found more out about their own culture, stuff they didn't know, because a lot of these indigenous groups, history happened. This is why Scots people don't speak Gaelic as much anymore. We had history, and if we
mhm.
spoke our language, we would be killed. So it stops people wanting to speak their language. If you look at the
Yeah.
First Nations in Turtle Island or Canada, residential schools stripped their language, their culture from them. There's a lot of games, or a lot of people who are making games that are trying to re-embrace Anishinaabe-Moan or Ojibwe, these languages, these traditions, and share it with the community. So Elizabeth Leponce makes a lot of beautiful games. When Rivers Were Trails is
Mhm.
just gorgeous, but The problem that a lot of these indie devs face is that they'll get government funding for the creation of the game. So
Mhm.
enough to pay people a modest salary to create the game. But there's generally not a lot put in for marketing
Mm.
or the promotion. So these games they're not well enough known. If they had a certain amount to put in for marketing, for promotion, they would be much bigger and it would reach a much larger audience and people would really get to appreciate these wonderful games.
Yeah, that would be amazing. And what you were saying is also a challenge, probably, to make all of these stories diverse enough, which I think we have seen push from society in general towards games being a little more inclusive.
Mhm.
But to make this inclusivity authentic, to have not only the token white woman,
Mhm.
but also more ethnic diversity, more variety of characters that are true and real throughout the gender spectrum as well,
Mhm.
and to see a bigger variety of relationships as well. It's also interesting to see games where you can romance more than one character,
Yeah.
and that character can be not necessarily the opposite gender and
Mhm.
stuff like that in the RPG category.
Obviously, I am the designer in residence for women in games, and I run the Twitch stream. But I am a white woman. Well, I'm Scottish, so I glow in the dark. My skin is blue, but I identify as a white woman. Adding a white woman to your game does not make it diverse,
Right.
particularly if it's not as a playable character, but also there's a whole fucking range of colors of people
Mhm.
and genders and sexualities and neurodiversities. These are things we need to be embracing and representing.
Yeah.
Probably 70-80% of game industry is neurodivergent anyway, because we're creatives and that tends to be the case, but we're
Yeah.
not necessarily making games where we're represented. And I think that's something that needs to change as well. But it doesn't take a lot. It's not a lot of effort to get your game checked by
Mhm.
someone of that culture, of
Mhm.
that sexuality, of that gender, of whatever the character is supposed to be.
Yeah.
Not as a tick box, but as a genuine, please can we check if this is okay? Can you
Yeah.
consult on this? It's not a
Mhm.
lot of effort and it makes such a big difference. I run a stream where the streamer actually just stopped and started crying. Big, fat tears.
Mhm.
And it was, oh my God, what's wrong? But it wasn't tears of sadness, it was tears of joy because they had literally never seen themselves represented positively in a game before.
Wow.
And the impact of that was so powerful. And the same with Still Wakes the Deep for me. That hit me in all the feels.
Yeah.
And like I said, that is the power and responsibility because that's the positive impact. I've also played games where Scottish people have been represented as a lazy trope. We're drunk, we fight, we're unintelligible, you can't understand us because of our
Mhm.
accents. And the anger that instills in me is, it does make me angry and it does make me fighty. So it enhances the stereotype.
Yeah.
But it's just, we're too culturally diverse now to not be correct. And it's not good enough to just be lazy and throw someone in there. There's an amazing game called Paper Trails, which
Mhm.
is, I judged it many years ago for a competition and now it's released. And essentially it's this game where it's based on origami. So you fold the map over to solve the puzzles to be able to progress.
Okay.
And it's gorgeous. It's just beautiful. And it's an interesting mechanic that I've never seen done in this way before. Innovative, fresh, beautiful story. And some dick has put it already on the feminist game, don't bother fucking playing. They're just trying to
Oh,
push
no.
feminism on us. And give him his due, the creator had posted it and he said, fuck me, I shouldn't have made the character a female who wanted to go to university.
Mm.
And that
Wow.
was enough for this one asshole to just get vitriolic. And we
Yeah.
all know what happened with Sweet Baby Inc. The whole blowback from that of people, how dare you make our games more diverse?
I
Don't
think that
play them.
is something that we see a lot more in the gaming industry than in the heavy metal industry and or in the communities respectively. I think maybe it is the fact that online hate is the same in both communities.
Mhm.
But I feel like in the gaming world it might be a little more normal, quote unquote, or established that we have a weird handle. We are hiding and in our nice, safe space behind our screens. And so we can be, more hateful against other people. But I think we know a lot more of women who have been harassed and gotten death threats and a lot of very negative, feedback and commentary just for being feminists, for advocating for basically human rights.
No,
And
absolutely.
it's so infuriating.
So there's someone I know, Anita Sarkeesian,
I was
amazing
thinking of her.
person. And she did the feminist frequency. So essentially, she wanted to Kickstarter just to investigate and do research into female tropes in games,
Mhm.
save the princess, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And the backlash she got from that was above and beyond disgusting. Death threats to her house, to her family, fakes of her being gang raped. They made a
Mm.
game called Smack the Stupid Bitch, where it's her face and you just click on her face to bruise her up.
No.
The kickback was disgusting.
Yeah.
The positive that came out of it, I think she was asking for a certain amount of money. She got something like 4 or 5 times that amount of money because people were like, yeah, we need to support you.
Yeah.
Take all the money. And so she created Feminist Frequency, which is a whole learning pack that is out there for free for anyone to sort of explore these feminist ideals, or not even feminist ideals. I wouldn't call myself a feminist. I'm an equalitist. I don't want to be better than you because you're a man and I'm a woman. I want to be equal with you. You shouldn't hire me because I'm a female. You should hire me because I'm the best at that. But yeah, definitely check out the Feminist Frequency and like all of the learning package that Anita's put in there. But there's so much of this. And I think part of it, just like you said, is that whole mask mentality. And Twitter's a dumpster fire anyway. And I'm a firm believer that there are people who just sit on Twitter waiting for something that they can get all vitriolic about. They don't even care about it. They just want the attention. And
Yeah.
problem is sometimes people feed that beast. So someone comes out with something nasty and so they retaliate and it just builds and builds. And then other assholes join in and that whole mob mentality sets in as well.
Mhm.
And this is so much easier said than done. But if you just ignore these people, you're not feeding them. You're not giving them the attention that they want. So they move on to something else.
Yeah.
But when it's so cold and so personal in these attacks, it's very difficult.
Yes, that is very true. And my point was only how different it can be, how violent that was the case with Anita Sarkeesian, and how we, well, fortunately, don't see that in the heavy metal world. We don't see women in metal being harassed just by, like you said, wanting to make the metal scene more diverse. But it's still so shocking to see how like humans can still feel so threatened, maybe, and how all of that negative energy comes out of this fear of my space to be a man is being threatened and they're taking everything from me. And that is a very dangerous thought and the slippery slope that leads to violence, not only online but also in real life, and even to more extreme cases of radical thought.
No, exactly. But it's generally people just sat behind the computers with a handle, being faceless, and therefore they're super, super brave. But I almost guarantee if you saw them in the street, they
wouldn't dare.
they wouldn't say anything to you because that's a very different story. The saying that it's not a bad space to be in. There's a lot of good in games and in the gaming community and the gaming creation as well. And I say a lot of that vitriol and that nastiness isn't coming from the game devs or the creators ourselves. It's coming from outsiders who maybe play our games, but just have a very narrow view of what we do. And to be honest, how many games get released every single day? If you don't like that game because it's got a female protagonist, play another fucking game. Don't waste your money on it. This game has a female lead. Don't waste your money on it. Go and get yourself a VR sex game where you're a young lad who's moved into a room with 4 women who all desperately want you. There's a game for you out there. Just go onto Steam. You can find all this shit.
That is true. Terrible, but true. The world is a very terrible place sometimes.
It's batshit crazy, but I think it's when you're getting angry and aggressive about stuff that doesn't concern you, has no impact on you,
Mhm.
then you're automatically in the wrong. Things like homophobia or transgender, does that affect your life in any way? That
Mhm.
what that person identifies as or what that couple does in their house? It has zero impact on you, so shut the fuck up.
Exactly. And also giving marginalized minorities basic human rights won't take
Uh-huh.
anything from anyone else.
No, exactly. And if you
So,
don't want to play Life is Strange because there's lesbian undertones in it, don't play it. Don't get
yeah,
offended. Play something else. Play Crossfire. I don't know.
exactly.
But there is, I think there's within the gaming community, particularly for streamers and girls who stream Call of Duty,
Mhm.
Crossfire, PUBG, these kind of games, I know a lot of them do play without a mic and with a
Mm.
gender neutral name
Yeah.
because the backlash, one friend in particular had forgotten to turn off her mic. So halfway through a game, she said something and her team were
Mhm.
like, "What, you're a girl?" And they all turned around and shot her and then kicked her. And you're like, you've been playing with this
Ugh,
person for how long? And she's been
yeah.
helping you. She's probably the best player on the team.
Yeah. Absolutely. There have been some very cool awareness campaigns on the topic. How there was this one as well that got male streamers using voice modulators that made
Hmm.
them sound female or feminine, made them sound feminine, and how their teammates then reacted to that. And they realized then being in the shoes of a woman in games, how that feels to get this negativity all of a sudden and for no reason.
Not exactly. And I think it is that whole adage of walk a mile in someone's shoes before you can
Yeah.
actually understand. And I think, particularly from that research, that the outcome was, oh, so women aren't just moaning about nonsense because people aren't talking to them. It is actually,
Real.
there is a severe reaction.
Mhm.
Only in, I know women that play PUBG and all of that and do really well and have very supportive communities that they play within. So it's not everyone, it's not all. So we do need to be careful of not tarring everyone with the same brush and saying all of this is bad. It's not. It's just that there's a tendency when something is bad, people talk more about it.
Mhm.
And you don't generally say, oh my God, I was playing a game with, I was the only girl on the team and like, everyone was really nice to me and I had a really good game. You generally don't post about that, but you
Sure.
would post about some huge negativity that happened to you. I mean, we had a situation in your stream for Women in Games where
Mhm.
someone was desperately backseating you.
Mhm.
So I was messaging them privately. Please don't backseat Kiki. She just wants to explore and find out the game for herself. I know the game because my friends made it. I could have backseated you through everything.
Mhm.
That's not an enjoyable gameplay. So
Yeah.
they ignored it. They did it again to you. So I messaged them, whispered them because I didn't want to call them out in chat. So I was trying to be
Yeah.
polite. And their answer was shut the fuck up. It was like, wow,
Yeah.
wow, thank you. They're now banned, of course, but
Yeah.
it's that kind of, oh, you're a girl, you don't know how to play a game. Let me tell you. Let me mansplain how to
Yeah,
tell.
yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah, douche.
Yeah, that is so weird. I've seen that happen everywhere though, and I think that the more difficult the game, like all the FromSoft games and Souls games and such, get more backseaters
Mhm.
across the board. But yeah, it does become a sexist thing when they see a woman having a bit of trouble and they're like, "Oh, this is how it goes."
Yeah, but they also forget that the first time they played the game, they didn't solve it immediately.
Mhm.
And part of the fun of a game is trying to work stuff out. It'd be shit if you got a jigsaw puzzle that was already made. What do you do with it then? Put it on your wall? Part of it is trying to work out, how does this piece fit? Does this one go with that? And that's
Mm.
the same as a game. You want to die a few times. If you could
Yeah.
just go from beginning to end, there's no challenge. And that's what we want in games. We want the challenge.
Yeah.
So just backseating someone all the way through or mansplaining how to do something, it's not necessary. We weren't
No.
speed running the game.
That can be a bit of a challenge from a game design perspective. I was a few years ago at a Pride event in Malmö, and they had a panel of game designers and developers, and they were talking about how to avoid that type of negative interaction,
Hmm.
new or different tools of interaction in game are necessary. Because if we know, okay, because the world is a shit show, we can't really show our voices. We're turning off voice chat. then what are the differences, or what are other tools that we can use in game to communicate with our teammates and avoid that sort of backlash and discrimination? Let's call it what it is.
There are, and there's so many chatbots, and a lot of games have started really heavily investing in that space because people are quitting the games because of the backlash that they're facing. And when someone starts coming after you, like in Sweden, I think there's like all of your addresses are public, that you can't have your address X directory.
Mhm.
So when people start sending stuff to your home and your home is your safe space, it can get really scary. And I had a
Yeah.
streamer that was away to quit because of just this absolute vileness that was happening to them, because they had the audacity to be a queer female playing a game live on Twitch. But
Ugh.
again, if you don't like it, don't watch it. No one is
Yeah.
forcing you to watch this. But there is a lot of investment going into making these spaces safer, a lot of research going into it. And there has to be. And whether it's
Yeah.
coming because you're female, because you're a marginalized community, whatever, no
Mhm.
one has the right to discriminate and make you feel small and basically shit on you for
Yeah.
how you look or how you live your life or how you talk or what religion you are, for example.
Yeah.
Because games are supposed to be there for fun. Music is supposed to be there for fun. It's
Mhm.
entertainment at the end of the day, right?
Mhm.
You're not going there to scream a feminist agenda. You're just a female playing a game. There have been bands in the past in the metal scene and in the grunge scene and an alternative scene that have been really feminist forward. But, and obviously, I'm not talking about the Spice Girls here. They were as far away from that as I can even imagine. Girl power.
A
Ugh.
little more like Pussy
Um,
Riot, but yeah.
yeah. But Riot Girl scene was all about taking that space, being as hardcore as the men, being as strong as the men, not taking shit, standing up for ourselves. We were, because there hadn't been this space for, not angry, but feisty, aggressive, not aggressive, but feisty, strong headed women before, and music that represented us. And that was something that
Mhm.
was really cool. And even with Nirvana there and that kind of scene, it wasn't about women skimpily dressed, gyrating all over the stage. It was all about the music.
Mhm.
And I think that's the space that I grew up in. And that's the mentality that I've carried through to games and to that space that I want to represent. I don't want to
Hell
pander
yeah.
to women or make things easier for us. I want to help us fight for where we need to be. And that
Mhm.
goes for anyone from marginalized. The whole point is to amplify voices and give space because there's always room at the table for you.
Yeah.
Sometimes you've got to elbow your way in and take your own chair. But that
Mhm.
table's big enough for everyone to sit down at.
True. Oh, that's a beautiful image. And I do think that things are changing, and I have this impression of the gaming industry as very welcoming and very open. And I think it's the one industry across of all our shitty capitalist system
Mm.
that actively looks to become more diverse and to
100%.
hire more people from all different backgrounds. And there are several initiatives bringing in funding for
Mhm.
female-led games and making education more accessible. So if
Mhm.
you actually want to become a game designer or a game developer, there are different initiatives that can support that. And I think that is really valuable.
No, it definitely is. And I would say, particularly in the indie space, is way more diverse. I feel, again,
Mhm.
this is just opinions. And the games that they create tend to be also more diverse because indie studios can take more risks. Indie studios are able to pivot faster. They're a lot more agile. And getting a female queer protagonist through in a AAA game takes a lot more effort. Whereas if it's your game and your fucking studio, you can do what you want. I believe the indie space is intrinsically a lot more diverse, and the hiring isn't tick box hiring. It's genuinely looking for best fits for the role, for the goal. And I think more than that, we're able to do it genuinely. And there are a lot of schemes. Like I met with a wonderful woman from PlayCap who are angel investors based in Stockholm who are solely focused on female led, or at least one of the leadership roles is female. So it could be co-founder and very heavily leaning towards female studios. And they're investing in those spaces. And I think that's
Mhm.
amazing to occupy that space and to be able to give back to the community.
Yes, absolutely. That is really good. I just wanted to read some numbers from the Women in Games website that when the organization was founded in 2009, women were only 6% of the games industry workforce. And now 4 years ago in 2020, the average statistic is 22%. Things are getting better, but another number that I don't see often enough is that 50% of players are women as well. It's just an image of the population. It's the same as I think very probably for heavy music.
Exactly. Really disturbing statistic. And I believe this is from 2017. So hopefully, 2021, sorry. Hopefully things are a bit better. I don't know. In America, the community, the demographic that plays more games than any other is African American, male and female. I think it was like 51% and 41% of Caucasian Americans play games. So more African Americans play games. The percentage of people who identify as African American within the American gaming industry working as devs in a senior or above level, 0.01%.
Oof.
That was the reaction I had. It was what the fuck?
Heavy, yeah.
So how can we make more diverse games if we don't have more diverse communities creating these games? And that's part of the problem. But also countries like America, Canada, education is really expensive there. I'm lucky in Scotland, university is free. I believe you have to pay in England, but in Scotland it's free. So that kind of thing doesn't block us in terms of the barrier. But if you're from a low-income family and university's like hundreds of thousands of dollars, and if you're not a super sports star, how is that going to help you?
Yeah.
The secret is, and this really should not be a fucking secret, that you do not need a game degree, or you don't need any degree to become successful in the game industry. The vast majority of us, particularly Gen X and then the next generation, don't have degrees in game design because they didn't exist. The first game design degree was 1996 at Abertay University in Dundee. So before that, you could do computer science or something, but no game design degrees. Most of us got in through other skill sets, but you don't need to go to university. You can be a bedroom coder. You can teach yourself Unity, or even better, teach yourself Unreal. You can build up an art portfolio. You can do all of these things by yourself if you're motivated. You can get internships. Us two who make the wonderful games, Alba, Monument Valley, Destra, these games, they do internships every year. Apply for these. Look around for internships around you. Apply for jobs. A lot of the jobs, it may ask you about a degree, but they'll also ask you for your portfolio, for your ArtStation site, for your website. So if you are excited and want to follow that rule, and then you want to teach yourself any of these skills, do it because it's valuable. And the same in music, right? A lot of these, let's take Nirvana, for example, they didn't go to university to study music.
Yeah.
And a lot of the best musicians are self-taught musicians. And game industry is similar in that kind of vein, that you don't need a degree. Yeah, a degree is nice, but I tell you, my philosophy and film studies has not helped me at all. Mandarin, only when I'm talking to Chinese people, but not really so far, apart from when I started out in game industry. It's not been intrinsic, and it's not been a reason why I've been hired for a role. In fact, my latest job, we were talking about different markets that we should be focusing on. And I said, obviously, Asia and China. And my boss is like, why? Mandarin's my second language. And he literally said, what? I didn't know that. So it's not actually been anything that's got me anywhere where I am in game industry. So you don't need that. Breaking down those barriers of you need a degree and the cost of that. Yeah.
Yes. That is a great note to end on, I think. Yeah. To note that things are getting better slowly, if slowly, but there's change. These usually thought, these areas that are usually thought as man dominated or so masculine spaces are becoming more diverse, and that is super important.
But
And
it's not closing the amount of men in that space. So it's
yeah.
not saying like we're bringing in a woman, so one of you's got to go.
Mhm.
We're creating a bigger space with people with genuine common interests. So how is that a bad thing? And change is
Yeah.
happening. And I'm a hella impatient person because of my
Same.
neurodivergencies. I want it to happen now. But I think I really firmly believe that for any change to happen and for it to be lasting change, it does need to happen incrementally and slowly. We can't wake up one day and just change everything because it wouldn't last. And that impatient side of me, I have to keep her to one side and say, just calm your boots, just calm down.
Mhm.
Because it is getting better. We are making progress. There's AAA games now that have female protagonists. There's games, I'm a cultural sensitivity expert on a AAA game where every character, their backstory, their look, everything is being heavily informed by cultural sensitivity experts. And this is a
Mhm.
AAA. So it is happening. It's just happening a lot more slower than we would like. But these things
Yeah.
will build momentum and we'll really start to see the change.
Yes. And I think there is a lot of value in just trying to find those collaborations. I just listened to another podcast just now about music, but there was this beautiful quote about no is the answer to all of the questions you're not daring to ask.
Yes.
And another one thing that we talked about at the Tuska Forum by Bleeding Metal this year in Helsinki at Tuska Festival, I had a panel with the audio designer from Remedy Games
Hmm.
and the band The Poets of the Fall that is part of the Remedy universe. And we asked them about how can we create a synergy so that the gaming industry that has maybe a little bit more funding and is better off financially right now than the music industry.
Yeah.
How can we create collaboration so that both can thrive? And the Ville Sorsa from Remedy, his advice was just shoot your shot. Just go with your music to a gaming studio and make them a proposal. Just introduce yourself and your music and tell them to consider you for their next project, for their next game that they will be developing. So,
Top secret. Can't really talk about it, but there is a game coming out that I'm helping with that is IP of a very amazing metal band. And the
ooh,
game is going to be shit hot. Yeah, because it's going to hit all of the good nostalgia feels of
mhm.
like Gen X. It's when I know more that I can release, I will let you know.
Oh, yes, please.
The crossover between games and music, like I said, is so important.
Yeah.
Bands are using gamified elements to
Hmm.
promote albums, songs, videos. Games are collaborating with bands to do that crossover because we've got this
Yeah.
community in our gaming community. You've got that community for your music. Let's join the communities. And yeah, so there's so much space for overlap that is crazy and stuff is happening that is
And for growth.
very cool. So stay tuned for that info.
Oh, yeah. Thank you so much, Charlie, for your time and all your insight and lovely stories. It's been a pleasure to have you. I hope we can have you back soon. And to everyone out there, thank you so much for listening. We will be back next week. And don't forget to subscribe to the Bleeding Metal podcast wherever you're listening. And don't forget that we're back on YouTube with some new video interviews as well. You can subscribe over there as well. And yeah, thank you, Charlie.
Thank you
And
so
bye,
much for
everyone.
having me. I've really enjoyed it.